Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on the Megatrends in Latin American payments. My name is Javier Delgado. I'm the Digital Marketing Director for America's Market Intelligence, and I'm going to be serving as the moderator for today's webinar. So before we get started, we just want to give you a rough idea of what to expect over the course of the hour. Basically, we're going to have a general presentation, and we're going to integrate your questions throughout the webinar itself. Normally, we take them at the end, but in this particular instance, we're going to try to weave them in as much as possible so that we can address them as we go along throughout the presentation. The way to ask a question is pretty simple. If you look on your screen, you should see a series of icons, and one of them is going to say Q&A. You click on that, and it brings up a window. You can type in the question in there and hit enter, and then we'll receive it. You can ask the question at any point in time during the webinar, and then we'll try to take care of them attend them as best we can throughout the entire presentation. All right, let's move on a little bit to talk a little bit more about our legal notice. I'm not going to read this word for word, but it is going to give you generally an overview of the presentation today. It talks about the accuracy of the information by third parties that we try to verify and what we expect with the information and our liability in this case. So I encourage you to read that at your leisure. That's something that we just basically have to get out of the way to get started. Moving on, there's a bit of background about us as a company. We've been actually operating in Latin America for the past 30 years. Over the course of that time, we've executed something like 300 studies in the payment space. And we focus on a lot of different payments topics. Many of you may know this, many of you do not, but this is basically our area. So we're sharing some of the knowledge that we're observing over the course of doing all these studies, especially in recent times with today's Megatrends webinar. Now, this brings us to our speakers, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves one by one to you so you can get to know them.
Thank you, Abel. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Lindsay Lehr. I lead the payments practice at America's Market Intelligence. And many of you guys know us, you've been following us, you attend our coffee chats. We're really excited to present a more comprehensive, full-blown look at the region over the course of 2 days. This is going to be a webinar, two-part series. So we're just thrilled. We're thrilled to be here with you and to have, I'm joined by two distinguished speakers, Marina Gil, Senior Consultant on the AMI Payments team.
Hi, thank you, Lindsay. Hello, everyone. Nice to have you all here with us. I am Marina Gil. I'm part of the payments team, more specifically based in Brazil, covering the region, but specifically focused on the evolution going on in Brazil. Hope we can have a great discussion today, and thank you for having us.
Thanks, Marina. And I'm extremely pleased and excited to introduce Juan Miguel Guerra, CEO of Revolut de México. He'll tell you a little bit more about his role. But Juan Miguel is someone I admire and respect very much. I'm really excited to have him here to be able to discuss some of the trends that we're seeing, particularly in Mexico, and in representation of a very exciting company. So Juan Miguel, thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me. Super excited to be here. I hope I live up to the expectation. It should be a fun chat. Yeah, I've been in fintech for a long time. I founded a fintech in 2012. I call myself the grandfather of fintech in Mexico, even though I'm a relatively young guy compared to other peers in the industry. Very happy to be here. So thanks for the invitation.
Excellent. And just give us a 2-minute elevator pitch on Revolut for those who are not familiar.
Needs no introduction. Revolut is the father of all fintechs. A bunch of fintechs in LatAm set out to be the Revolut for Mexico, the Revolut for Brazil, and it pains me to have to say that no, guys, the Revolut for Mexico is going to be Revolut. What Revolut does is it brings. Revolut started off with a very narrow niche product in the UK, which maybe I'm butchering it, but it was kind of like a substitute for traveler's checks. And then it just evolved quickly to become a financial super app that's present in over 35 countries, has over 20 million clients, bank licenses in Europe, and a bunch of other licenses across the world, a bunch of bank licenses in process. So in 7 years, Revolut has become a global fintech super app, which is becoming a bank in various places. It's been a tremendous journey. There are some countries where 60% of millennials or more are Revolut users. And so it's been tremendous. What does this super app thing mean in 5 seconds? It's just being able to manage all of your money on one platform. So typically you would find that fintechs would specialize in one or two products, credit cards here, trading over there, crypto over there. But if you look at the product that Revolut has created in the UK, it's not the same, there's no parity across the world yet, but in the UK, you have all of these things in one app. So if you took all the fintechs currently operating in Mexico and you combine them into one app, you would still be short of all the features and services that you can find in Revolut's app in the UK.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great, and I think that's piquing a lot of curiosity. So we'll get into the details. Thank you so much. Okay, so before we get to our panel, we're gonna do just a quick kind of overview, setting the context of our megatrends, what we're gonna be talking about today. I mentioned that this is a two-part series. We have so much to share and there's so much going on. We wanted to separate this into 2 different days. So make sure to bookmark the same time tomorrow. But today, if you go to the next slide, Abel, we're gonna be focusing on our first 3 trends with a focus on the evolution of instant transfers, instant money transfers via ACH or other alternative networks. With the massive success of Pix, we're seeing this really become ingrained and actually become very serious competition. And the model being replicated with many different variations across the region. I'll also be looking at how that is very closely related to promoting and accelerating open banking, and how instant ACH is bleeding into shopping and other transformative elements we're seeing in the consumption and online, specifically in the online space of e-commerce. Okay, so really the main theme for today is watching how years of kind of rigid structures are finally really starting to be cracked open. As we're seeing more interoperability, we're seeing faster and instant payments take place. And really up until really about 6 months ago, we had cards and cash. And cash being the majority share there, and cards being the other key player. And really now that paradigm, I don't want to call it a duopoly, but that paradigm is really changing, being led by Brazil and being replicated in other markets. So that's what we're going to dive into. All right, I'm going to kind of speed through some of our content just to lay the foundation and then get to our discussion. So if we go ahead to the next slide, we will start looking at what we're saying, Pix and beyond, okay? I'm assuming that most of you guys who are with us today already know what Pix is, already has a good understanding. It's been well documented, the success of the massive levels of adoption that we've seen of Pix in Brazil, the central bank real-time payment platform. But we're just going to go a little bit beyond the basics and look at how Pix is performing within the person to business or person to merchant vertical. So if we go to the next slide, what we, at AMI, we were tracking this very closely all throughout last year. We know that Pix has had exceptional success. 124 million Brazilians are using Pix. In Q4 of 2021, the number of Pix transactions surpassed both credit card and debit card. And the volumes are really impressive. When we look at Q4 of last year, we see that Pix, just the person to business channel, so Pix for purchases, already represented almost 60% of debit card volume. So really starting to compete with card levels. Up until last year, or throughout most of last year, our assessment was that Pix was really converting cash, boletos, and TEDs and docs, not yet taking away share from credit and debit cards. But when we look at e-commerce, Abel, if we go to the next slide, we start to see a little bit of a different story. And Marina, once we get to our conversation, will give us a little bit more detail on this. But when we dive specifically into the e-commerce channel, and we finished our analysis of 2021 e-commerce performance in Brazil, what we're seeing on the slide here is the share of total e-commerce breakdown by payment method. And we can see that from 2020 to 2021, every payment method lost share, while bank transfers 99% of which is Pix, increased share quite drastically. And so already Pix is representing some 15% of e-commerce transactions. We expect that to keep increasing to maybe reach a plateau of around 30 to 40% in the next couple of years. Okay, if we go on to the next slide, what I find most fascinating about Pix is that the fact that it's a government promoted, developed and governed platform that is really successfully becoming what I'm calling a mainstream competitor in the payments industry. And they're not only establishing the rails and the infrastructure, but they're actually really have a complex roadmap for a whole series of features and services, including contactless Pix, automatic debit, Pix credit, Pix garantido, cross-border Pix. So adding on multiple additional features that add value to the Pix platform and will make it even more competitive and compelling for consumers, and enabling it to move into even to have more relevance in a large variety of payment transactions. So the fact that I see, we kind of observe this as really being a competitor to cards, certainly to other wallets, not only increasing the competitive conditions of the market because it's creating openness and interoperability and instant payments, but actually becoming a competitor in and of itself. Okay. So where else is this taking place? If we go to the next slide, what we're seeing is, Pix is by far ahead of the game in Latin America, where other instant payment schemes are really in their infant stages, with a lot of variation across the region of the different models. The most similar platform to Pix that we see is Costa Rica with SINPE Móvil. It doesn't get a lot of press or airtime, but we see that, in 2021, it accumulated $6.5 billion in transactions compared to $7.5 billion in debit card volume. So that's a similar proportion of Pix to debit card that we're seeing in Brazil. So it really is starting to be very significant, a similar type of competitive element in Costa Rica. In these other markets, we see bank associations and banks coming together to create consortiums for interoperable bank transfers, and we see private banks, in the case of Peru and Panama, that by themselves, a dominant bank coming out and creating a very successful P2P platform that in both cases have really successfully taken the leap into merchant payments. So, we have these three different models, all of them evolve according to particular conditions in the market. But what's important to see here is that with Brazil setting the pace for the region and the level of digitization being already at a level of maturity to enable this, we're seeing instant bank account transfers or instant P2P transfers really becoming a true force in the payments ecosystem. Notably absent from this list is Mexico, and we're going to get into that with Juan Miguel a little bit. Of course, Mexico has its CODI platform, launched in 2019. In the opinion of many, has been a failure, has not really gained traction, and has not gained adoption at the same levels that some of these other platforms have. We'll get into why in a moment. And Mexico is notably, for its level of development, for how many fintechs operate there, for how large and developed of a country it is, it's notably behind in some of these areas. So that's what we're going to discuss a little bit more in depth a little bit later. Okay. Excellent. If we continue on, a quick look at open banking. Okay, open banking has been a big kind of Pandora's box, a big question mark for a lot of people. It's been in the news and in the press for several years now. If we go to the next slide, we can kind of see the mapping of the progress of open banking across the region. Regulatory pushes for open banking in Brazil and Mexico. Market-driven initiatives taking place in Colombia, Chile, and Argentina. But for most, it's really been a big question mark on, okay, we see that this is somehow happening, but what are the actual implications for users? We have seen very few use cases and actual tangible results for users so far in the region. If we go to the next slide, what I actually want to point out are kind of two of these real tangible results of open banking and how that is having an impact on consumers. And one of them is very closely related to PIX. Now, some of you may have already heard about payment initiation. Basically, it's a portion of the central bank regulation which enables non-bank platforms to initiate a payment via PIX natively within their app. Okay, so if you think about what that means, this is an iFood example. This would be here on the left is an iFood example. Normally, if I'm making a purchase within iFood, a food delivery app, and I want to pay with PIX, I have to take this long code that it gives me, go through a redirect to my bank, paste in that code, and initiate the payment initiate the PIX payment from my mobile banking app. It requires a redirect. It requires up to 7 or 8 steps and can be confusing for someone who's not patient or who's not savvy with technology. What the payment initiation function does, which is being implemented currently by the central bank in phase 3 of the open banking regulation, is that it enables iFood, for example, to initiate a payment directly in its app. And so, as you can imagine, that will make PIX transactions even more seamless, even faster, even easier, and promote PIX payments even more, considering it already has 15% share of e-commerce transactions. Mercado Pago was the first company to receive a payment initiator license. And so, the first tangible implication of this is that Mercado Pago users can directly bring funds from their bank account to the Mercado Pago app without having to go into their banking app, making that even faster and easier. And so the big fear, one fear among large institutions is that this is going to make taking money out of their bank and funneling it towards fintechs or neobanks even easier and more commonplace. But from the user perspective, it's going to make payments even more instantaneous, faster, easier, more seamless, and making digital transactions even better quality. So we expect this to continue to accelerate PIX further. Okay. The other, if we go to the next slide, the other real tangible impact of open banking that we're starting to see and is the use of fintech or banking as a service. Okay, in which a licensed entity will extend their services to a non-licensed entity and enable that licensed entity to offer financial services. And this is a little bit different from that open banking regulation that we saw laid out in the region, according to the regulation in Brazil and Mexico. But it is a way of, via APIs and via integration with multiple companies, of expanding and extending the offer of financial services. And we have two different kind of paradigms. In Brazil, where this is moving very quickly, so far being a successful model, we have several companies offering fintech as a service across many different verticals and being successful so far. On the other hand, in Mexico, this is a little bit stagnated, where we've had a lot of regulatory uncertainty, and actually, the cracking down on this practice just recently at the end of last year, in which we could say the leading provider of fintech as a service was actually denied the ability to do this, and causing a big disruption in the fintech environment in Mexico. And so currently there's no regulatory path forward for the fintech as a service model in Mexico. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more. So we kind of have two friction points here. On the previous slide, we saw something that's really accelerating an implication of open banking that is really accelerating digital payments. And then another implication here that is causing acceleration in some places and kind of stagnation in others. Okay. All right. And so going into our third trend, what I call the transformation of shopping, and consumption and the way we shop is being transformed in many ways. But I think our opinion is that the discussion of shopping or consumption doesn't get brought in to the discussion around payments often enough, because it's considered a different industry. It's retail, it's e-commerce, it's whatever. However, but payments are essentially a vehicle to make purchases. And so we always have to be thinking about these two in tandem. And so if consumers' behavior around shopping is changing, that's implicitly going to impact the payments industry. So to look at a couple of these trends, if we go to the next slide, one that I find fascinating that's really taking off in Brazil in particular, and then we're starting to feel the waves across the rest of the region, is a trend around live shopping and shoppertainment, in which I'm sure many of you, especially if you have kids or teenagers, have experienced the rise of influencers, the live shopping in which influencers are hosting a show, hosting a live on their social media sites or on the same retailer site, getting followers and interacting with consumers in a totally different way. This is starting to be adopted by almost all of the major e-commerce leaders in Brazil, as well as Rappi. We see Asian marketplaces really impacting this trend, bringing this trend to Latin America. And this is forcing retailers and brands to think differently about how they interact with their consumers. And the more you have an interactive, real-time sales model, the more you need an interactive and real-time payment method. And this is part of the reason why we're seeing Pix succeed so much in the e-commerce channel. If we go to the next slide, I cannot take credit for this data. This data comes from a study done by Rapid that we came across, conducted in 2021, which I found fascinating. And it really speaks to the role of social media, similar to what we just saw on the previous slide. The role of social media in e-commerce and social commerce. And what I find most compelling, most interesting about this data is on the left here, we see, the percent of consumers in these markets that have already shopped on social media, and the percent that prefer to shop. We got about 20% of consumers that prefer to shop on social media compared to retailer or marketplace websites. The other very important data point here is if we look to the right, bank transfer is the #1 preferred payment method when we're talking about sales on social media. And these sales are most likely not being captured through any kind of e-commerce payment gateway. They're most likely taking place directly via Pix, via SPAY, via some kind of external P2P app. They're not natively integrated into these social media sites, so they're not captured as e-commerce. And this is a phenomenon that is capturing billions of dollars, especially among small merchants and kind of lower pyramid consumers who maybe don't have a credit card and who spend their consumption their consumption is really centered around social media platforms. Okay. And so on the next slide, another very important transformation that we're noticing within the consumption, the shopping experience. This is very emergent, and we're going to talk much more about cryptocurrency tomorrow. So if you guys have detailed questions about crypto beyond just what we're talking about today, we have a whole session dedicated to that tomorrow. But I do want to mention that we're starting to see, about a year ago when crypto was really taking off, crypto adoption really started to be felt in the region. The main narrative was that, crypto, Bitcoin in particular, will never be used as a means of exchange because the technology is not fast enough or efficient enough to enable transactions at the level that the card networks are. Also, the currency is too volatile to enable to make people want to spend their Bitcoin. But we're starting to see that certain companies in the region, certain merchants and brands are leading the way with accepting Bitcoin in particular, as well as other cryptocurrencies. We have some examples here. This is all very recent announcement of now you can pay with Bitcoin now you can pay with Bitcoin at Electra. Rappi made a recent announcement. And we're starting to see this also take place globally and in the US. According to some recent survey data we have, among cryptocurrency users in Latin America, 1 out of 5 of them have used crypto to make a purchase already. So this is happening. And we'll be watching to see if this is kind of just a fad to position your company as an innovative player and on the leading edge of innovation and payments, or if this really starts to be a daily habit for a certain segment of consumers. Okay, so that was kind of lightning speed covering 3 trends. What I see as the needle that we can thread through this content that we're talking about is kind of what I said at the beginning. Alternative networks, including Pix, including Yape in Peru, including others, are really becoming entrenched in consumers' daily lives. And so now we're no longer in a world of cash and cards, but we're in a world of cash, cards, and alternative networks. And cash is no longer the biggest competitor. That used to be a refrain, right? Cash is the enemy. But now we have a more competitive and dynamic ecosystem to deal with. We're seeing government become actually a competitor in Brazil in particular, not only a regulator, but also an active competitor. And what we're seeing with the crypto trends is that consumers are really driving the trend. It's not being pushed by any particular company or any particular type of companies. Consumers are asking for these crypto solutions and are out ahead of the demand currently in Latin America. And that's different from every other payment evolution we've seen in the region. And then finally, we're starting to see Brazil really pull ahead. We're starting to see increased distance between Brazil and other markets in the region, which requires an even more targeted approach as we look at Latin America as a region. Okay, so just some really high-level themes for us to be keeping in mind as we're thinking about some of these trends. I see lots of questions coming in. That's excellent. We're going to move into our discussion. I believe, can we go to the next slide, Abel? Yes, great. So I'm going to take a breath and you guys will hear some other people talk for a moment. We're going to go into some discussion here. Abel is going to help weave your questions into our discussion. So Abel, please jump in at any time when you see some of these questions kind of relevant to what we're talking about. But I want to go to you first, Marina, to go a little bit deeper in Pix, okay? So we've seen some really compelling data so far on the success of Pix in e-commerce. And I know you've talked to many players in the Brazilian e-commerce ecosystem about this. And so could you share some of the different insights you've heard from merchants, from payment processors? Why is Pix being so successful, particularly in e-commerce compared to maybe in-store payments? And what are some of the insights that have been shared with you?
Sure, great point. Because honestly, I was surprised when we were running the data for e-commerce and we saw the relevance Pix gained during the last year, right? So the first thing is like Pix for e-commerce, like it take a while for companies to start offering Pix as a payment method because they needed some integration, the technology part. And then the providers, they started offering like plug and play solutions to accept Pix. So this made a lot of merchants starting accepting Pix. And as we included there, currently market players mentioned that around 70% of the merchants accept Pix at e-commerce merchants. This is really a huge number of companies accepting, right? And then in terms of, I was asking all the big marketplaces here, why people are paying with Pix, what happened? Because we know that like it's a trend that credit cards was representing around 70+% of the transactions here in Brazil, and Boleto around 20, right? And what I heard that I think it makes sense, but it's really interesting, is that first of all, a lot of people buying at e-commerce, they don't have their own card. They had to ask for some friends, relatives to use their credit card because they didn't want to use Boleto, right? But now they have the option to pay with Pix, and it's simple, it's convenient. So most of those that doesn't have their own card and were taking from someone else, they now have an option that is easier. So Pix took a part of that. And the other point is, we know that the credit cards, they are really running a lot of anti-fraud for the e-commerce because of the increase in the frauds during the pandemic. So normally, I mean, it's not unusual to have your transaction denied. And what is happening is that you try once, you try twice with your card, and if you can't, you just go and pay with Pix because it's easier and you guarantee your purchase. So those were, I mean, the fact that the market prepared, like the technology for companies to offer Pix, is one big incentive. And then those two main thoughts that guided Pix to take some share from the cards. And what I think it's relevant, because last year in the Megatrends, we mentioned about debit card in Brazil, right? We were expecting it to grow because of the Corona voucher payment, like the subsidy that government was paying via an online debit card. And what we heard also is that debit card, in fact, lost share because it didn't really took off here in Brazil because of the 3DS that really didn't work it as expected. So this is also something that Pix can have changed the mind of the Brazilians purchasing online because it's much simpler, right? And being an alternative. And just to close, what I think it's really important to mention is Boleto, because I'm as Brazilian and all the market players, when we start talking about Pix, we thought that Pix would really reduce Boleto a lot. And in fact, it reduced it, of course, but not in the same speed as we were expecting. And most of the players told me that Boleto has an important role for those that don't have any access to banking system. They just go there, they print the voucher, they go and pay. While Pix, at least you have an account. So this is, I mean, this can change, of course, because Pix is evolving so fast, but it's important to see that Boleto is covering this part of the population that reduced it a lot, but still are unbanked here in Brazil.
Yeah, I think that I thought that was also really interesting. The takeaway being that Pix, that cash, even despite the success of Pix, that cash is really still relevant. At least, about a 10% share. I think it's about the same in Mexico. So it's still a relevant technology.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's go a little bit to Mexico, Juan Miguel, because I get asked this question all the time, and I don't always feel like I have a sufficient answer. And the question is, we've seen massive success of Pix in Brazil, and we've seen CODI, which is not exactly the same as Pix, but it was born with the same intentions and the same spirit, to increase financial inclusion, to reduce the use of cash, to enable a real-time mobile payment. Why, I was just looking at the data yesterday, actually, and it's really amazing. In February 2022, CODI processed $9 million in the month, whereas Pix processed $120 billion. So Pix is over $1 trillion now on an annual basis, and it's been around for a year less than CODI. So in your opinion, you're the grandfather of fintech in Mexico. You're very close to this topic. Can you shed some light on, and maybe give me some answers when the next time someone asks me?
Yeah, sure. Let me first, before I answer your question, just to make sure that everyone gets the implications of this and the genesis of this, let me set the scene a little bit. So this all was born in Europe with PSD2, the Payment Services Directive 2, which seems to have taken the view that Visa and MasterCard were effectively a duopoly, that were extracting value from society to a certain extent, and that therefore it should be possible for people to pay directly from one bank account to the other, bypassing card rails entirely. That was the spirit of PSD2. And governments around the world have been taking steps in that direction to greater or lesser extent, and to, with greater or lesser success. So I think that was the motivation behind CODI as well. If you could release 3% of all digital transactions back to society, wouldn't that be a good thing? I think that was what they were thinking. And I tend to agree with the spirit. But I think the big difference is that the consultation base and the co-creation exercise that took place in Brazil was much more inclusive than in Mexico. So I think there were some design flaws that have been plaguing CODI from the beginning, which might perhaps not have been there if it had all been done in a more inclusive way. For instance, CODI is absolutely free. So therefore, there is no economic incentive to propagate the network. Another example, CODI is only open to a select few banks and players, but what you want here is network effects, right? The value of a telephone grows as more and more people have telephones, because you have more people you can talk to. But if you only have CODI present in certain places, then the value of the network is pretty limited. And then thirdly, I think this is often overlooked. Fostering innovation and financial inclusion is great, but I think we put the cart wheel in front of the horse. Picture the situation. Someone is, I don't know, selling you tacos on the street, and you're like, oh, I'm short of cash. Can I pay you with CODI? And they're like, what's CODI? Oh, this wonderful way I can pay you directly to your mobile. Okay, great. What do I need? Oh, you need a bank account. Perfect. Can I open it on my mobile? No, you need to go to the bank branch. You need to complete, after an hour there, maybe you get a bank account, and then you get your tokens and this and that and the other. And then you can download the app, and I can pay you with CODI. Well, I think that, we started from the payment side of things without taking into account that perhaps the first barrier was the account opening side of things. I think this has now been addressed, but it has taken the banks and less so the fintechs some time to start offering the right journeys. But the fintechs, again, are not participating in CODI. So again, it comes down to the banks offering a fully digital account opening experience that can take place within minutes. And so all of these factors combined, I think, makes for lackluster performance for the solution. Now, all of these things can be addressed.
Just to compare with
the picks tomorrow.
Just to compare a moment with Brazil, because you're laying out some really key points here. The co-creative process that you mentioned, Marina, can you share a little bit about from your understanding how that happened in Brazil? What do you mean by that exactly, Juan Miguel? Like what happened in Brazil? What did the central bank do well when conceptualizing PIX?
Yeah, I guess how they operated well is because central bank involved all players in the development of PIX, right? They create these work groups, and in each of the work groups, for example, a security work group, processual work group, another work group to develop the product. So in all of these work groups, they had players, market players from the main institutions, right? So they listened to the market and they built the system together. So this already is a big advantage, because since you are building together, you can't complain after, right? I mean, you can, because central bank is the one deciding, but at least you were involved in all the process. And also, I think the other really difference is that central bank allowed not only financial institutions to operate PIX, but all institutions like payment institutions. They onboarded fintechs, payment initiators, processors, so payment gateways. So this brought, it's much broader than only having the financial institutions in the process. So both fintechs, payments, any kind of payment institution worked together with the traditional institutions, and also they are now part of the process offering and accepting PIX. Mm-hmm. So I guess you know, we are used to say that Brazilian central bank, they have an innovative agenda and they stick to what they say. And this is what I think they gained the market, you know, the market partnership, instead of being the regulator against or trying to be to include obstacles in the process. In the opposite, they are really trying to make things work.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And you know, there's an interesting comment here from the audience. The central bank in Brazil saw this as a public utility open to all. I think that's what you're speaking about, right? Enabling fintechs beyond just banks. You know, we have over 900 institutions participating in PIX. And that goes back to what you were saying, Juan Miguel, about digital, the importance of being able to open an account, not even necessarily a bank account, but a financial account digitally in a couple of minutes. And so I want to go to this question about the role of fintechs in Mexico, because this is a super convoluted, complex issue. And, you know, going back to what I was speaking about, you know, this regulatory kind of these barriers that have been put in place. Right now, we have the fintech law, which is meant to license fintechs to enable to open accounts and hold funds and operate, you know, alongside banks. It's been stagnated. It's been slow. Only a handful of companies have been regulated. Now we have eliminated the ability of, you know, fintech as a service. So how do you see, what's the path forward for fintechs in Mexico, specifically around being able to offer accounts and enable people to onboard digitally and participate in this ecosystem? How do you see the future? What's the path forward?
Yeah, so that they can do. So today there are a number of fintechs that are operating because they were grandfathered until they get the formal license, and they're still operating. And there's a bunch of others which have been approved. They can do the most elegant, you know, they can offer the most elegant onboarding experience in Mexico today. It may not be the safest one, so they may want to include controls that are not required by law, just to make sure that they're attracting the right people. But you know, if you're only offering debit as an IFPE, you should be fairly safe.
And when you say safe, you mean, you know, safe from fraud, from
fraudsters, mule accounts. Yes, yeah. So that has skyrocketed together with e-commerce, right? And the level of sophistication of fraud has also escalated dramatically. But again, it depends also on the risk profile of what you're doing. If it's just a little bit of e-money, it's not the same as if someone has their life savings there, and it's not the same as if you were offering a loan, right? So today, you know, for the people lucky enough to be operating already, then it's not that much of an issue really. For new entrants, this is a barrier, and this is limiting. You know, this is putting off investors and jobs and innovation. That's just not happening because of very long timelines, and also the unpredictability of said timelines. That's the scariest part. So I hope our regulator gets through this quickly, and we can catch up and pick up the pace again, because there's just a lot of interest. There's just, it's so ironic how, you know, it's so sexy to be doing fintech in Mexico right now, but unfortunately the timelines have just ballooned. So hopefully this will be resolved soon. For banks, the regulation allows for a bunch of things, but in their case, it's been on them. They're just so slow. So regulation is not the problem. I don't think.
Okay. That's an interesting take. And so tell us a little bit about Revolut, you know, your strategy and how you fit into this kind of, you know, situation in Mexico. How are you guys resolving the regulatory barrier, because you are a new entrant, and how do you see yourself playing a role in the Mexican market?
Sure. Let me add a little side note that can help people picture where things are going with payments, and then I'll answer your question. So Revolut started out as a companion card. It was, in fact, it was a prepaid card originally, and then it became an e-money card, and in some cases now it's a bank card. Different parts of Europe, But people in Europe typically have their old bank and Revolut alongside it, and they do most of their spending with the Revolut card, but they maybe get paid their salaries into their old bank or whatnot. With open banking in the UK, you're now able, if you want to top up your Revolut card, you don't have to go into your bank app and make a transfer. You just tap a button, kind of like what you were explaining with Mercado Libre.
Tap a payment initiator like function.
Top up, correct. And it just pulls the money from your old bank account into your Revolut account. So it's slick. It's a beautiful experience. And that's what great looks like for payment initiation. So it's already happening in the UK. You can have a look. Okay, so what's our strategy here? Revolut's main value proposition, aside, it has a bunch of value props and it depends country by country, but one of its biggest strengths is being able to offer all of these financial services 10 times better, 10 times cheaper, all in one app. So in order to do that in Mexico, we evaluated different licenses and so on. And we discovered, look, we don't want to hack our way through this and provide a patchy user experience. Let's just go for a banking license. And we're playing a long game. We think we can get this done very quickly. Personally, being involved in obtaining a bank license before, the team are very seasoned. I think we're going to get the fastest ever bank license in Mexico, hopefully. Famous last words, but I'm very optimistic, and I think the team in the regulating entities looking at our application are super competent. So I'm not too worried. I think we're going to get a bank license in record time, and that will allow us to offer our whole breadth of products and services in a single platform, as we like to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's very exciting. A couple follow-up questions there is, I see with the absence of a centralized real-time payment platform like we have in Brazil, there's really a vacuum in Mexico to really fill. There's also not one leading fintech yet or neobank yet that has really come in and be dominant in Mexico. So I see it as, prime for the taking. So one question that's top of mind.
Hold my beer.
What's that?
Hold my beer.
Right. Exactly. So one question top of mind is, what will it take to become the leader in Mexico in particular? And how do you guys plan? We also have Nubank, coming, recently announcing increased investment in Mexico, really committing to Mexico and Colombia. So do you guys see yourself similar to Nubank? Do you see what are the key differentiators? How do you plan to compete? What do you see as being the key?
I think Nubank have done a great job in Mexico positioning themselves philosophically as an alternative to the bureaucracy and complexity of day-to-day banking, and I think that's been very well executed. I think their customer service levels are excellent, and that has created a very positive buzz around the brand. For us, we would expect to also offer phenomenal service, but a much wider breadth of products. Now, we'll see, right? We'll see what people prefer, and there might be, horses for courses. Certain groups will prefer certain offerings, and maybe at different life stages too. But I think over the next 10 years, we're going to have a winner takes most phenomenon in banking in Mexico. I think winner takes all is unlikely. I think a duopoly is unlikely, but heavier concentration, I think, is likely. And I think that future belongs to whoever can offer an interface that solves more problems for customers in one place. And so, prior to joining Revolut, I was building financial services within Rappi, which they're an e-commerce platform venturing into financial services. But if you look at the Revolut app, it's a financial services platform that is, fully fledged. You can completely get rid of your old bank and just transfer over to Revolut and not miss your old bank at all, because basically it has everything you need, maybe except mortgages. And even in the UK, it's going beyond that and venturing into e-commerce. So now you can book flights and stays on the Revolut platform. So I see a convergence of fintech and e-commerce all in one platform. Mercado Pago, Mercado Libre are a prime example of this. So I think players who see that, players who, rather than think of themselves in terms of how they define themselves, think of how customers see them. If you become the Swiss Army knife for daily life for customers, you're really onto something. And so I think that's what the future will hold. And I think payments, contrary to China or other places, I think proprietary QR payments are not the way to go. I think open loop systems like Pix are much better, and we shouldn't be competing on that front too much. I think we should collaborate more than we compete on that front. And I think Pix is a great example. The one thing that I think is a bit concerning is, this is all well and good, and it's been proven to be phenomenally useful and convenient to millions of Brazilians today. I think it's phenomenal. Unfortunately, government there is judge and jury, and that can become a Pandora's box down the line.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. If you're if you're the central bank and you regulate payments, but you also are the provider of the payments infrastructure and the payment service, and there's no recourse if something goes wrong. You're not going to tell the central bank they did something wrong, because what are you going to do about it? So we need to think through this very carefully. I don't think we have a great answer for this. And again, if we go back to the story of the genesis of all this, a lot of this has been motivated by wanting to break down a duopoly, and wanting to break down a duopoly, aren't you then created a government-run monopoly? Is that better? Maybe in the short term, for sure, but down the line, could this not be problematic? So some checks and balances would need to be in place at the very least, I think, for this to work well long term.
I love that perspective. Thank you for bringing that up. Pix, the central bank and big proponents of Pix, say the goal was to create better conditions for competition, reduce the barriers to access, create a more open infrastructure, which it certainly has. But if you take that too far, now you have the dominance of one state-owned platform. So it's a very interesting question to be looking at. So one last question for you, Juan Miguel, and then I want to go back to Pix because we have several questions here from the audience. But can you speak a little bit about remittances? Because that's the kind of the first product that you guys announced and started, promoting, remittances from the U.S. to Mexico. I mean, the second or third largest corridor in the world, billions of dollars opportunity. My question for you is, Revolut is like, the financial super app, really enabling an international lifestyle, right? For in my mind, for a more digitized consumer, but remittances is a more like lower bottom of the pyramid type of product. So how do you marry those two?
Yes and no. So there are lots of flows between the US and Mexico. Money doesn't neatly fall into political borders. We have friends, we have cousins, we have colleagues, we have jobs across the border. The cross-border region is a region by itself. It has its own life. There's a lot of money flowing back and forth, both countries, biggest corridor in the world, right? So we just make it easier for people to move their money across borders and have an international lifestyle. And an international lifestyle doesn't necessarily mean jet setting, from Paris to Tokyo to London. It could be, I have a cousin in the States and I get money from my cousin to help, support our grandma or whatever. But it's just such a pain that I have to go to a physical store and pick up the cash, and my cousin gets shafted. The The World Bank estimates that the average cost of remittances from the US to Mexico is 5%, but we've seen examples of 15%, much higher than that.
And the target, right, is 3%, right? The global standard that they've set is 3%. So even that's high.
Quite a lot of money, exactly. So, if 50 billion was sent last year, and I think it's a lot more than that, but let's say it's 50 billion, and we paid on average 5%, that's $2.5 billion that gets sucked out of people on both sides of the border who could really benefit from this additional cash, right? So I am hugely proud that Revolut has done this. I can claim no credit for this whatsoever. I'm just very proud to be part of this organization that's making this available for free. I think it's going to be a huge win. And I remember once going to a banking convention where the now current president of Mexico said he would offer an award to whoever could make remittances cheaper for people sending money to Mexico. Well, I'm gonna cash in on that and find a way to contact him and say, hey, we're making them free.
Awesome.
What do you think of that? Yeah, we're excited. And now we want to also enable people in Mexico to send money abroad for free. So basically breaking down barriers, and the international audiences, again, not necessarily jet setters, but people who have interests across borders are most the group with the most affinity to our core value propositions.
Well, to your point, remittances isn't only migrant workers, and it isn't only these jet setters, right? I think the more we're shining the light on cross-border flows, we're going to be finding the huge variety of use cases that exist out there, and developing better services tailored to each of those use cases. We're seeing it with Revolut and many others who are really honing in on cross-border flows.
Yeah, think of, global nomads have exploded as a phenomenon. There's a lot of people living in Mexico, getting paid from the US, moving money across is painful. We can fix this. And if we have both sides of the border, we can fully KYC both parties. And so do this cheaply, quickly, and securely.
Awesome. Absolutely. Well, fantastic. We're just about out of time. There are some more questions in the chat, which we are going to try to follow up with over email, those that we can. So don't worry, we will be responding to you all. Thank you for your questions. I want to take just a quick moment to launch a poll for our audience today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And what I want to put out here for all of you is, AMI, we're obsessed with these topics. We're researching them constantly. So if you would like more information, if you want to work with us to try to answer some of your strategic questions, if you need data, if you need insight, if you need analysis, that's what we do. That's what we're about. So please let us know if you'd like to be contacted by us to talk about, how we can help you. Feel free to fill in the poll right here. If now's not the right time, maybe in a couple months, we'll reach out a little bit later. We just want to, take opportunity to serve you guys at the highest level and be there for you as you're navigating this highly turbulent and uncertain environment. So we'll just take about 10 more seconds. Go ahead and answer that poll for us. And in the meantime, let's go while we're doing this, let's go to one question, Marina, on Pix here. The main question was, how do you see Pix in the B2B space? It's not an area that gets really talked about all that much. Do you see it replacing TEDs, Docs, Boletos? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, great. So B2B, I guess I responded some of these questions, but what we saw is like the B2B Pix increased a lot in the last few months. Of course, P2P started faster, but B2B is now gaining traction, and you see it represents around 34% in terms of volumes of the transactions. But if you go to the number of transactions, it's only 7%, which means it still have room to increase. But what we see is that all companies are trying to, reduce expenses, and we have some institutions that are not charging for Pix. because I don't know if it's clear for everyone, but Pix P2P, it's free, no cost, but companies, institutions can charge for business owners, right, accounts. But some banks, as Nubank, Banco C6, they are not charging even for business. So this can be a good incentive for companies to start using. What I see as the biggest issue there is the reconciliation process, because Brazilians are used to pay in the B2B via boletos and TEDs, and already have all the technology and the reconciliation process built for that. So it will depend on some investment to make it easier because of the volume of accounts a business has to pay. But I do believe it will, now that companies are starting to really use it, it will grow and be a representative as it happened in the P2P space.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's just, we're just at the top of the hour. So Abel, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I just want to give a final reminder to everyone that our conversation will continue tomorrow. If you go one more slide, we will be moving into our second set of megatrends with a big focus on cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and how that's related also to credit, savings, investment, and talking about how the fintech community is evolving to incorporate crypto and how important that is and is going to be to staying competitive going ahead. We have some new data to share with you. We have a very excellent guest who's, you know, a superstar in the fintech world and an emerging thought leader in crypto, Thiago Diaz from MasterCard. So I really encourage you guys to come tomorrow. We'll see you tomorrow, same time. Thank you, Juan Miguel, for being with us. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. And we look forward to being in touch soon. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much.